Hello, everyone. Well, thank you for joining today's webinar. I see that there's still some people joining us as I speak, but I believe it is time for us to start, and people will hopefully more people will join as we go. So today we'll discover how to leverage your knowledge of Excel, one of the most popular software in the world, and see the benefits of switching to a more modern analytical approach with KNIME visual workflow. As always, we want this webinar to be as interactive as possible, so please feel free to ask questions via the chat, and we'll keep some time at the end to answer as many as we can. So for today's webinar, we will be 3 speakers. This being a joint webinar with our partner KNIME, we have the pleasure of having Julien with us today, and I will leave him introduce himself.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity to join you on this webinar today. My name is Julien Nordman, Head of Partnerships EMEA at KNIME, and together with our partner Mydral, I'd like to welcome every one of you to this joint webinar.
Thank you, Julien. So now on the Mydral side, so we have Marius online.
Hello, everybody. I'm Marius. I'm a consultant at Mydral, and it'll be my pleasure to do the live demonstration with you today.
And myself, Julien, who is in charge of Mydral here in the UK. So let's start. So here's a glance at what we'll cover in today's webinar. And we'll start by briefly telling you a bit more about who we are, about Mydral. So who we are and how we fit in the data space. I will leave Julien say a few words about KNIME. And next, we'll then give you a bit of context into why we believe adding a workflow approach to your skill sets can make you more efficient when dealing with data-related tasks. And finally, Marius will illustrate some of these points via a live demo. So let's get started and let's talk very briefly about Mydral. So Mydral is what we call a data pure player. We've been around for more than 12 years, and all that expertise revolves around data and essentially helping our customer create values from their data. So we are a consulting business, and this translates into a number of things. Like help in choosing and implementing the right solutions, project support or project management, strategic consulting, or even training. So we have what we call the Data Academy, where we've trained over 4,000 people in business intelligence, and so on. And to achieve this, we have experts, over 60 consultants with various profiles and expertise. And that really allows us to cover all aspects of a business need around data, as well as working through the various stages of the value lifecycle of data, which I'll talk now about. What is the data lifecycle? It is our approach to our customers' project. It represents all the steps and stages for creating value around data. And it goes from preparing data all the way to data visualization. And the idea is that you are a person, that person on the right of this illustration, and you're going to ask yourself, or you're asking yourself some key questions about your business. This can be about day-to-day operations, like understanding your sales performance, or maybe some more strategic decisions like finding new revenue streams. And Mydral is here to help you find answers to these questions by leveraging your data and ultimately help you make more data-driven decisions. And to do so, we'll go through various stages, like collecting the data, connecting it, cleaning it, enriching it, and so forth, essentially creating the data preparation stage. And we'll also help you with the second stage of the value lifecycle, which is everything around data visualization and sharing insight with reports, dashboards, or maybe some more advanced representation like storytelling and data journalism. So that's kind of Mydral in a nutshell. and I'm going to leave Julien tell you a bit more about KNIME.
Yeah, thanks. Next slide, please. Yes. The KNIME Analytics platform is a visual open source platform for creating analytics and data science. And it's easy and intuitive to use, and the integration of many other technologies is seamlessly possible. For example, here in this picture, you can see on the bottom right corner a visual workflow that you can create with KNIME when you build your solutions based on KNIME. And because of this visual nature, KNIME makes understanding data and designing data science workflows accessible to everyone. The KNIME Analytics platform, with all its native KNIME extensions and community extensions, is open source and free. And for operationalizing and productionalizing KNIME workflows usually in an enterprise environment, our commercial offering, the KNIME server, is usually used. And the KNIME server is usually used in addition to the KNIME Analytics platform. And as you can see here, the KNIME server brings additional functionality for collaboration, automation, management, and deployment.
Thank you, Julien, for telling us a bit more about KNIME. So the objective for this next part is to dig a bit deeper into why we feel it is important to discuss the differences between a workflow approach and a spreadsheet model like Excel. And it really starts with the fact that Excel has been around for over 30 years now, and is accessible to almost everyone. But this has kind of created a situation where people try to solve almost every data related task with Excel, using it from storing data, from cleaning data, creating formula and calculation, to sharing analysis. But as we know, one tool can hardly ever do everything, and try to use Excel for advanced or responsive analytics like flexible charts, dashboards, or just analyzing large volumes of data is in most cases using the wrong tool for the job. And the idea here is that by switching to what we like to say or call a more modern analytical approach using visual workflow, this will result in less time spent, fewer errors, and overall greater consistency and productivity. So in this, moving to the next slide. So in this section, we wanted to highlight some of the most common challenges and time-consuming aspects that one can experience when using Excel on a regular basis. The two I wanted to mention first are the size limitation and dealing with multiple data sets, which I think we kind of have all experienced at least once. Not knowing whether it will open the file, whether it has freezed when dealing with large files, or having to deal with copy and pasting from one Excel sheet to another or one tab to another. And all that is just very time consuming and, quite frankly, prone to errors. The other two that I wanted to emphasize are auditing and troubleshooting, as well as the sharing and collaboration aspects. Both can be quite challenging in Excel because mainly of its lack of transparency, or how easy it is to delete a cell, break a formula, or just try to understand what was previously done. The last point also that I want to make on this topic is the complexity around creating interactive dashboard or creating automation with Excel. All that often relies on coding or some cumbersome or complex operations. So those are the few limitations that I wanted to highlight. And to summarize all of those, I think it comes to a point where, or when it becomes difficult to maintain and improve an Excel workbook, while using a workflow approach, which is by definition a process that allows you to visually trace and retrace your steps at any point in your workflow and at any time, can be quite beneficial. And this is what we'll try to address or at least illustrate in this demo. We'll look at some of Excel most common operation and how to recreate them using KNIME. And we also try to illustrate what I just mentioned, which are the differences between a spreadsheet model and a workflow model. So that being said, I believe it is time to get into the heart of today's webinar and leave the mic to Marius, who's going to do the demo for today.
Thank you, Julien. Well, so as Julien said, let's get into it right now. Today we'll be taking a look at a certain file which contains the total final energy consumption at a regional and local authority level in the United Kingdom. Anyone can find that file. It's provided by the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy on data.gov.uk, the UK government open data website. Let's take a look at the file right now. So I've opened it right there. As you can see, well, it's an Excel file, and I think it illustrates quite well what Julien has been talking about. So, first thing you see when you open that file is that well, that title tab. So it's really a report, but it's also a data set. So as Julien said, it's trying to be both at once, maybe. You have a title, so a title tab. You have a background where you have external resources to understand maybe what you're looking at, and then you have tabs containing data, so to speak. So what type of data do we have? So we have, as we said, our local authorities, so basically councils or counties in the UK, and then we also have on the same column the region. Okay, so different geographical levels, and in the columns right there we have energy types, so coal, manufactured fuels, petroleum products, and for each energy type, the sector in which it's been consumed. So industrial, domestic, rail, and you also have the totals for each energy type. Also the last three columns are actually the totals, not for each energy type, but for each consuming sector. So I think this file is the epitome of what Julien was talking about. It's not really a data set, but it's not really a very good report either, is it? You can't really compare figures together, because as we can see, each tab represents a different year, and also what you don't see, but what I will show right now, those tabs are in kilotons of oil equivalent, which is a unit to measure energy. And if you look a bit further in the tabs, so you see how cumbersome that is. If I want to look at all the tabs, you have the same tabs right here, but in a different unit, in gigawatt hours, which is, well, another unit of energy. So it's a report, but it's not easy to navigate and compare the data. Of course, it's nicely formatted. I mean, there's nice colors and figures are sometimes in bold, but that comes at the expense of sometimes inconsistent types. For instance, those are all numbers throughout this column, but here it's a string, so it's not really a number. It's gonna maybe pose some problems later, we're gonna see. And it's also not really a data set because, well, it's a table, but it's pivoted, so you can't really use it directly to build maybe a nice report. Actually not in a DB format. So we're going to use that file. We're going to use it. We're going to import it in KNIME to illustrate KNIME's data prep capabilities. What we're going to do is that we're going to unwind we're actually going to unwind that report and turn it back into let's say raw data put in a database format, if you will, and then from that maybe we could perform some further analysis, maybe produce a visual report. Let's depending on what time we have left. So without further ado, let's get into KNIME right there. Now, I'm not sure that many of you know KNIME, that everybody knows KNIME. So let me take you on a quick tour of the interface. At the center right here, you have the canvas. This is where you're going to build the workflow. So the succession of nodes linked together, which represent data flowing from node to node. So this canvas has already got an annotation. I've already put a title. So I've already named that workflow, if you will, because that's what we're going to do today. On the top left corner, you have the KNIME Explorer. The KNIME Explorer is a repository where you can put well, anything you like, really. But what you're usually going to put is data sources and workflow. So those two things, final flow and live flow, are workflows, which are opened here. And you have, well, the Excel file and some other files which we'll be using. And this is actually, it could be a repository on a server, or it could be as in this case, it's simply a repository, a folder in my computer. So beneath that, you've got the node repository, which is basically your toolbox. This is where you're gonna look for nodes, which are nicely sorted. You're gonna look for nodes, and you're gonna drag and drop them into the workflow to build the workflow. So, for instance, if you're looking for a filtering node, you type filter, then you select the filter that you want. For instance, you want the column filter. You drag it and you drop it into the canvas, and it appears. Now, if you're not sure about what that node does, or what this node, right, if you're not sure about what this node does, for instance, the constant value column filter, you can always click on it. And then at the right side, you have the description. So it's a paragraph about what the node does. It's nicely detailed. You have information about how to configure it, and also what you should put at its input and what you should get at its output. On the bottom left corner, you have the workflow outline. This is simply a way to navigate quickly through the workflow if it becomes large. You see, I can just click in it. I'm sent it the other way across the canvas nicely. And finally, you've got the console at the bottom right here. That's where you're going to see warnings and errors if they occur during the execution of your workflow. All right, so that's it for the interface. Now, let's start working on the Excel file I showed you, which is right here. So as we did for nodes, you can simply click on the file and drag it and drop it into the canvas. And now KNIME recognizes that it's an Excel file and automatically creates an Excel reader node. Notice the sort of traffic light beneath it. Right now, the light is yellow, which means that the node is configured and it's ready to be executed. But unfortunately, it's been configured by default. So we need to take a look at what the default configuration is and maybe alter it. To do so, you right click on the node and you can click on configure. Now, the configuration window appears. It might look like a handful, but it's really simple. Trust me. So the first section here is simply the location relative to the position of the KNIME folder, so nothing to worry about. And then you have well, the sheet from which you want to read data. So for instance, let's say that we want to read, well, the first year to 2005 in gigawatt hours. Now you can specify if the table already contains the name of the column that you want in KNIME. And then you can specify whether you want to read the entire data sheet or sorry about this, the entire data sheet or only specific lines or columns. And at the bottom of this configuration window, you have the preview of what KNIME is going to give at the end once it's executed. So right now we can see that because of the formatting of the report, we have the 4 first lines which are not useful in this configuration in this table. I mean, they all contain red interrogation marks which are missing values. So we're just going to remove those by using this parameter right here. So you have to trust me on this. We're going to read from rows 5 to 409, 409 being the end of the data table, because there's some more formatting at the end of the table. Now, once you've done that, you can click on refresh. And now KNIME only reads the data, the actual data. And we're going to be missing column names. Not right now, the column names are all generic, but we're going to fix that right now. So we've configured our Excel reader. We can click on OK. So the light is still yellow because, well, node is still configured. And when a light is yellow, that means that you can execute the node. So you right click and click on execute. And the light turns green, and that means that the node has been executed and there's now data at its output, available at its output. So our initial data, our initial file, Excel file, hasn't been modified or anything. It's just been, the data has just been loaded into KNIME. And now we can work on that data using the workflow approach. If you right click and click on the bottom of the menu, you have for every node in the workflow what is at its output, the data that is at its output. So it's basically what we just saw in the configuration window. The data with generic column names, which we're going to fix right now, and also a column containing missing values. Now, we're going to dynamically change those column names, and to do so, I've gained some time by putting all the new names into file that I've called column names. So it's basically a dictionary. You have the old names in the lookup column and the new names in the replacement column. You click on OK and execute the node, and now at the output of the node, there is, sorry about this, there is, well, the table that we just loaded. Now, I'm going to use a certain node called the insert column header. Drag and drop it into the workflow. And now I'm going to have to link the data from both my Excel file and my file reader at the inputs of that node. So the first input, the top input, takes the data table that I want to rename the columns of, and the bottom input takes the dictionary table. Now you see that the light at the bottom of this node is red. That means that the node can't be executed yet. And when if we want to know why it is red, we simply need to look at the console, and there's a warning right there that's telling us that no configuration is available for that specific node, which means it simply needs configuration, which we're going to do right now. So right click configure. And we need to specify that we want to, that we're looking at the values in the lookup, the column names in the lookup column, and we're going to replace them with the column names in the replacement column. And now it's configured, properly configured. So the light turned yellow. It's ready to be executed. So we execute. look at the output. And now all the columns have been renamed in a nice way. So each column contains, each column is named after what it actually contains. So you remember that we had energy types and then energy and sector of consumption. So you have the energy type underscore the sector of consumption. So for instance, coal, industrial and commercial, manufactured fuels, domestic, and so on and so forth. So as I discussed when I showed you the Excel file actually contains data and also totals, which are actually a product of a calculation. So for instance, for coal total, for this particular row, they put together, they added coal industrial and commercial, coal domestic, and coal rail. And that added up to that. So it's the result of a calculation, and it's not part of the, it shouldn't be part of the initial data table. So we're going to remove all the result of calculations and aggregations. So in Excel, when you want to remove a column, you simply select the column and you delete it. Now, in KNIME, you don't really delete columns because, as I said, you don't delete anything. It's just the data is not changed until unless you overwrite it in KNIME. The data right now is not changed. So what you do is you actually filter out columns and rows that you don't want. So in this case, we're going to use a column filter. So same thing, drag and drop it into the canvas, link the nodes, the output to the input, and then configure the node. And we have the list of our columns, and we can move those that we don't want, that we want to filter out, so basically remove, in the exclude section. So we want to exclude all the totals, so rail, coal total, sorry, this is going to be troublesome, manufactured fuels total, again, yes, up. Petroleum products total, gas total. Coal 19 is actually the column that was containing only missing values, so we're going to remove that as well. Electricity total, all fuels, which is the sum of everything, we don't want that. And then these last three columns, which were the sum along the sectors rather than the energy types, we also remove that. So now we only have raw data, if you will. I mean, the data that was given to us. Same thing again, execute. And it's really instantaneous because what we did is just tell KNIME to not consider certain columns between the last node and this node. So right now you have the table without the columns that we just excluded. But if I insist that those columns were not deleted, if I were to now diverge and work from this node again by maybe using, I don't know, a row filter, I would link, if I link those two and create a divergent branch from the workflow, if I configure the, this is cumbersome, if I want to configure the row filter, you can see that the column is now the columns that I just removed in the upper branch are now available. This is a clear advantage of the workflow approach, which is that in Excel, if you start to delete things, well, you're not going to be able, unless you do a Control-Z, you're not going to be able to get them back, work with them again. So you're really on one single path when it comes to developing. But now you can diverge and go in different directions, quite literally. So back to what we were doing, we need to finish cleaning of our data table. So it's still a pivoted table. So the main operation that we're going to do is we're going to put that table back into a nice unpivoted database format. And to do that, we have just the right node because it's called the unpivoting node. So you just get unpick, and you get the unpivoting node, which you can drag and drop into the workflow. Link the nodes again. Now it needs a bit of configuration. So we want to keep, so we need to specify which columns are the value columns and which columns are the retained columns. So the retained columns are the columns that are going to remain as columns after the operation. So it's basically only LA code and government office regions. So basically the places, and all other columns will be stacked together, lumped together into one column. And then we're going to use the column names to specify what value we're looking at. So let me just put those area columns out of the value columns. Click on OK. I execute. And right now at the output we have, well, basically what we wanted. So for each county, we have an energy type and an energy consumption sector in one column, and the value associated to it. We also have that new column, row ID, which we're going to remove because we don't use it in that workflow. And I want to draw your attention to the fact that now the type of the column values is a question mark, and that is because we lumped together something that was recognized as a number, and some other things which were recognized as strings. So the dashes which I showed you in the Excel file, which messed up, which were there for show, to have a nice format, but right now they're messing up our table. But that's not a problem. We're going to sort that out. We're going to sort that out, and also we're going to rename the columns that we just created. But first things first, we're going to split, using a cell splitter, we're going to split the column containing energy type and sectors. We're going to split that column along, so we're going to split column names column. Every time there's an underscore, I want to split that column along the underscores, if you will. So I click on OK. It's all the configuration I need. Then I execute. And at the output, I now have two columns containing both one containing the energy type and then the other containing the energy sector for this particular council. So as I said, so let's remove now the columns that we are not going to be using. So another column filter, configure. We're going to remove row IDs and the former column names column, which we are not using anymore because we now have it's split. We have it split in two parts. Okay, and we execute. Now we want to rename and retype our values. So we're going to use a rename node, which is interesting because I showed you the insert column header node, which allowed to rename according to a dictionary table. But of course, much like you could do in Excel, you can manually rename the columns in KNIME. So, for instance, this first column we said that contain the energy types. So let's type in energy type. And this first column, this second column, sorry, contains the sector of consumption. So let's just type sector. Now the column values column contains, well, the value in gigawatt per gigawatt hour of energy. So let's type that. It contains the gigawatt hour value. And let's specify that it's a string before we convert it to a number using a node aptly named string to number. So I link the nodes together, and you see that I don't have to execute a node before creating the rest of my workflow, obviously. So I've got my string to number node, and I want to configure it as well. So I simply say I have to specify that I've got a comma for 1,000 separator, and the node I want to the column I want to convert is only the value column. So I keep it like that. Now when I execute that node, it's going to have to execute all the nodes which are before it, which come before it. So it's going to have to execute the column rename as well. Another nice thing about the workflow visual approach. So it executed both the nodes, and it gave me a little warning right here because some of the values were it wasn't able to convert all of the values in the gigawatt hour value column, obviously. Why wasn't it able to? Well, because as we saw earlier, some of the values were strings. But no matter, because what it did instead is turn those strings into missing values. So let me show you what it looks like. I look at the output. So in my gigawatt hour value column, I now the D before it tells me that KNIME recognizes this as numbers. And if I sort by ascending values, I can see that some of those values are what KNIME calls missing values. And yes, because as I said, he did the distinction. He understood that some of those strings he wasn't able to convert. Well, he just turned them into missing values. And if we look a bit further down, we have a distinction between a 0 and a missing value. So I choose to keep this distinction because missing value could mean that there was no data or anything of the sort. But if I want to leave this column as a number, I have to keep those missing values, well, as missing values. But we now have a nice table, so containing the codes, the area codes, the name of the councils, the energy types, and the energy sector. So if we had more time, I would show you. We would build together the workflow, the final workflow, but now I'm going to have to simply show it to you. So what we built together was basically the cleaning process for one sheet, but remember that there were several sheets, actually one sheet per year and per unit. So let me show you what the final workflow looks like. The first thing I want to talk about regarding this workflow is that I use workflow annotations. So those colored frames that you see around specific parts of the workflow are called workflow annotations, and they're a nice way to keep the workflow tidy. And you can, of course, edit and type whatever you want in it. So you can add comments so that your maybe your coworkers can understand what you did, or maybe you yourself can understand what you did. And for instance, I can understand what this whole loop does, what this whole section does, without even having to look at the configuration of any of those nodes. So what that does is this first node right here reads the Excel sheet names. So the names of the Excel sheet, the same Excel sheet that we've worked on. So at the output, there is, well, simply the names of the Excel sheet. This next node only keeps sheets talking about gigawatt hours. So at the output, you have, well, only the sheets talking about which are about gigawatt hours data. Now this right here, this loop start and loop end, those loop start and loop end nodes are really something because they allow this Excel reader node to loop over, to be executed once per sheet, per gigawatt hour sheet. and so it reads basically every sheet and collects and lumps together the results and collects them at this loop end node. So at the end of that loop. So basically, you remember that we had 400 rows per sheet, and now at the end of this loop we have, well, 400 times 13, I think, which is 5,200 something rows. This is something I think a lot of new KNIME users like about KNIME, how easy it is to read multiple files or multiple sheets, because obviously here we're reading multiple sheets, but we could be reading multiple files as well. Now, once I've read all the data from all the years and I've put it into one table right here, we simply do what we just did. So what we just did was the cleaning section of the workflow. So we clean the workflow and we unpivot it and we put it back into a nice format with the addition of the year. We add the year using a math formula node. And at the output of that section, well, there is what we really something very similar to what we had at the end of our workflow, with the addition of this year column containing the year of the measurement. So you see it goes from 2017 to 2005, which was expected. Now, a couple more steps. First of all, I chose to enrich the data. I added I added a geographical hierarchy to the data, which gonna make geographical analysis easier. And what that does basically is that for every council, I now have the upper regions, if you want. So I know that Blaine Gwent Council or county is located in the Gwent Valleys subregion, which is located in the West Wales and the Valleys subregion, which is located in the Wales, which is in Wales, obviously. So I just added that hierarchy right here, using again data that is publicly available on the UK government website. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned, and I should mention, I think, is of course KNIME can perform all the aggregations and the same calculations that Excel is able to perform. And I chose to give one short example of this in this this group by node right here, where I aggregate my data table. I want to aggregate it to the NUTS1 region level. So I just calculate the sum of the total final energy consumed per year per region. And what this looks like is, well, this. So for every region, NUTS1 region, that is, for every year, you have the sum of energy consumed. Pretty straightforward. The last thing about this workflow is the output. And just before I talk about the output, I just also want to draw your attention about those comments that were put at the bottom of the nodes. Of course, you saw in the live flow that we built together that when you drag and drop a node into the workflow, it just creates this default text, which is simply the number, the order, in which you put the node into the workflow. If you double click on it, you can edit it, or you can choose to remove it because, well, a column filter. So what did we do in this operation? We removed totals and empty columns. Type that in. And now you've created an annotation so that the person that you're working with, or even you, doesn't have to look at the configuration to figure out what the node does. So that's a nice thing to do to further collaboration. So back to that final workflow, the output, what do I do at the output? I just simply rearrange the columns using a column resort node, nothing to it. And then I use one of KNIME's great capabilities, which is the seamless integration with the different technology. And I chose to put that data table that we created into a hyper file, which is a Tableau format, because Tableau is the visualization tool we use here at Mydral. That Tableau file is actually right here. It's output.hyper. And well, actually, this webinar is not really about Tableau. And what I've shown you here, the preparation, sort of a preparation stage for a project. So the whole preparation phase that Julien was talking about. But I mean, I'm a consultant, and my job is not only to perform data preparation, but it's also to actually find insights about data by, well, preparing data and creating also visualizations using Tableau. So I want to take a couple more minutes to show you a quick visualization I put together in Tableau. So if you don't know Tableau, no matter, just have to know that this is the data that we just created into KNIME. This is the output hyper I just generated into KNIME. I've just opened it in Tableau. And I've also created this very quick dashboard. About which is a sort of a visual report. I've put it together in a couple dozen minutes, or even less. But I think it provides already more insight than the more direct insight than the Excel report did. Now I've represented a map, which could be better, but I mean, I didn't spend too long. But I've also represented an area chart of the energy consumption per energy type. And it's interesting, we can already see that the actual energy consumption in the UK has actually decreased from 2005 to 2017. It's decreased, and it's mainly because of the decrease in gas use. And it's actually plateauing since 2011. You can also see that there was a sharper decrease during the financial crisis, and then a slight rebound. But then the trend continued, and the decrease kept going until the plateau that's been hit since a couple years. I think that's a nice insight that you can derive from that data. Of course, that chart could have been created also in Excel, but I think not as easily as it can be done in Tableau. I can also show you that in Tableau the report is dynamic. So, for instance, if I click on this electricity flow, now the map has been updated to only show electricity consumption, and the list at the bottom only shows electricity consumption data. The last thing I want to show you actually is, you see at the bottom I've been a bit cheeky because I've recreated the same thing as what we could see in the Excel file. So pivot table with the the counties, and then the energy types and the sector of consumption. Let me show you really in a couple of minutes how easy it is to do in a tool such as Tableau. So you want your areas as rows, you want your energy types and your sector as columns, and now you want your values, your gigawatt hour values in the middle. Now you have almost what we want, but you could say if you look closely, you can see that we don't yet have the totals, but no matter, you can just click here in totals and add all subtotals. And there we have it. In a few clicks, I've already managed formatting issues aside. I've recreated the sort of report that we had in Excel, and I think that took a bit longer to create in Excel because of all the formatting and whatnot. Well, thank you for having stuck here with me so long so far. That was all for me, and I think I can give the floor back to Julien.
Thank you very much, Marius, for the demo. I think we'll take a couple of minutes to answer some of the questions we have received. So there's been quite a lot of questions, and we'll probably won't be able to answer all of them. We'll take a couple, and I will try to come back to you on a one-on-one basis. Just per experience, a lot of you have connected to the webinar anonymously. So if you've done that in purpose, then great. Don't move, don't change anything. If you have done that by mistake, you can share your email address with your questions so that I know who asked them and can come back to you with the answer. So there's been a couple questions around accessing the data set and workflow as well as the recording. So rest assured, we will share that with you, the recording, but also, as I mentioned, the workflow and the data set, so you can download it, practice it, and play a bit, or reproduce what we've done or what Mario's done today. That being said, there was I think quite an interesting questions, which was what are the top few benefits of KNIME over Power BI? And I think it is, and that was a question asked by Sean, and I think it's an interesting question because essentially those two tools don't really have the same purpose. And of course they overlap, but KNIME being more on the data prep and data science aspect, while Power BI, or for that matter, Tableau, is more on the data viz or insight exploration side of things. But why is it important or interesting is because the purpose of this webinar is not particularly to dismiss one tool or another like Excel or Power BI, I think, and to focus on what we've discussed today. Excel is a great tool and we'll continue using it on many occasions and for many purposes, but is to more emphasize the benefits of using a best-of-breed approach and selecting the right tool for the job. So that's kind of why I kind of wanted to highlight this question asked by Sean. Another question that was asked was about running VBA macro in KNIME. I don't know if Marius, you can address that.
Running VBA macros in KNIME. Okay. So I don't think, maybe Kilian, you can correct me on this, but I don't think there's a way to execute VBA code in KNIME. I don't think there's a node for it, basically.
You're right. There is no way to execute VB macros in KNIME, and I think that's also not the purpose. If you have a VB macro, then you should execute this macro inside Excel, for example. However, if you want to utilize scripting, for example, let's say Python scripting, R scripting, or even Java scripting, and so on, to implement your specific functionalities that you would like to apply on the data, there are also scripting integrations available for the KNIME Analytics platform. I already mentioned it. There is a Python scripting integration, an R scripting integration, but you can also integrate your own nodes or functionalities by writing Java code or JavaScript code. So if you want to code, if you want to script, it's possible, but not with VB scripts. Another question that I also wanted to point out, it popped up 1 or 2 times here, was how do I integrate additional data sources? And that's a good question. We saw in the webinar that it's very easy to add an Excel file using the Excel reader, simply drag and drop the Excel file into the workbench. But of course, there are many other data sources that you can access from within KNIME. You can read CSV files, you can read all sorts of text files, you can access databases, various databases via JDBC, you can access RESTful web services, even Twitter and other social media channels. You can scrape data from the web or access big data data sources like HDFS or Hive or Impala, things like that. And the way you do this is you simply use the right reader or connector node. For example, there is a database connector that allows a generic database connection to databases like Microsoft SQL, but also MySQL or Postgres or Oracle and so on. There are various reader nodes that allow to read various file formats like CSV files, Excel files, PDF files, and so on. And for every file type, usually there is an additional reader node for that. And then there are generic nodes like the web service nodes or get or post nodes that allow you to do an HTTP request to a web service, or you can use the Hive connector or Impala connector to connect to big data sources. So you can see if you have a specific data source in mind, try and use the node search in your KNIME Analytics platform or on KNIME Hub, hub.knime.com, and search, for example, for Oracle or for Microsoft SQL or for Hive or CSV or whatever data type or data structure you want to read, and then most likely you will find the right reader or connector node for that.
Amazing, thank you, Julien. So just to finish, so there's been a few questions on around training and tutorials. So I want to emphasize the community that KNIME has and how it can help you kind of go through that learning curve of learning how to use KNIME. There's also, various tutorials, blog posts that are all available on KNIME, which can really help you kind of start using KNIME. And of course, if you want to kind of speed up the process, Mydral offer also a wide selection of training courses with ranging from beginners to advanced users. So don't hesitate to come back to us and ask for more details. There's also, and that's a good transition to next slide, there's been several questions which are quite specific to one environment. So we'll try to come back to you privately, but I want to emphasize on the fact that we offer a free help desk hour where one person can have a chat on one-on-one with one of our consultants and address any specific data related questions or help you maybe on a specific project. So please feel free to reach out if you're interested. It's completely free once again, and we'll happily organize that with you. So I think that is it for today's webinar. I want to thank you again for attending. We hope that you got some value out of today. Once again, please don't hesitate to contact us if you want to know more about our training or maybe how we can help you on specific projects of yours. And also feel free to follow us. Follow KNIME or Mydral on LinkedIn and other social platform to get notified on future webinar tutorials and so on. Again, thank you very much for following, and I wish you all a great day. Thank you.